Welcome in, everyone, to this deep dive where we're going to be talking about Carol Dweck's mindset, the new psychology of success.
It's a fascinating book.
Yeah, it really is. And we're going to be really kind of digesting it, breaking it down,
Yeah.
seeing what we can learn from it and how we can apply it to our own lives.
I think it's a really important book because it really challenges a lot of common assumptions
Hmm.
about, what leads to success
Absolutely.
and what our potential is.
Yeah.
Um, and, I think a lot of people have this idea, and the book kind of pushes back on this idea that intelligence and talent are, these fixed things.
You got it or you don't.
Yeah, you're either born with it or you're not.
Right.
And that's it. And Dweck really argues that having that kind of fixed mindset can really hold us back.
Okay, so then what's the alternative to that?
Well, the alternative is what she calls a growth mindset.
Okay.
And that's instead of seeing your abilities as static,
Right.
you believe that they can be developed through dedication and hard work.
Yeah.
So this isn't about saying that like anybody can become, Einstein or
Yeah.
Beethoven if they just, have the right mindset. But it is about recognizing that we all have potential
Okay.
that can be nurtured and developed.
That's a much more empowering way to look at things, for sure.
Absolutely.
But I imagine it's not always easy to just like shift your perspective.
Yeah.
Especially if you've maybe been operating from that fixed mindset for a really long time.
Yeah, it can be a real challenge to sort of rewire our thinking.
Right.
But I think, Dweck points out a couple of really key distinctions between these two mindsets.
Okay.
So in a fixed mindset,
Yeah.
there's this constant need for validation.
Okay.
You're always trying to prove
Okay.
that you're smart or talented or,
You're good at something.
gifted.
Yeah.
Um, and this can make you incredibly sensitive to criticism
Mm.
because any criticism feels like a personal attack.
Yeah, you're almost like building your identity around being smart or gifted or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But what happens then when you inevitably face setbacks or challenges?
Yeah, that's where the fixed mindset can really become self-sabotaging
Okay.
because you start to fear failure
Yeah.
because it feels like a reflection of your inherent worth.
It feels like you as a person are a failure.
Exactly.
Right.
So you avoid taking risks,
Mm-hmm.
you stick to what you know,
Mm.
and you give up easily when things get tough.
I can see how that would really create this like vicious cycle.
Yeah.
If you're always trying to protect that image of being smart,
Mm-hmm.
then you're never going to allow yourself to really learn and grow.
Right. You're so afraid of making mistakes
Mm-hmm.
that you never actually, give yourself the opportunity to get better.
To learn from those mistakes.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
And she talks about how this can impact relationships too.
Yes.
And she even uses this term CEO disease.
Yeah, that's a great example of this kind of fixed mindset in leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what do you think that means?
Well, I'm guessing it's this idea that because you're in a position of power,
Hmm.
then you feel like you need to appear as though you're infallible.
Right.
And so instead of like seeking out feedback from others,
Right.
learning from your mistakes, you might surround yourself with yes people
Yeah.
and really resist any kind of challenge to your authority.
Right. You see this with, leaders like Lee Iacocca, who,
In his later years at Chrysler.
yeah, he was so successful early on,
Right.
but then, he kind of became resistant to innovation
Uh-huh.
and, really clung to these outdated models of cars.
It's like that fixed mindset is really trapping them in those past successes.
Right.
And then they're afraid to risk that.
Yeah, they're afraid to lose their perceived brilliance.
Right.
So they just kind of, stay stuck.
Okay, so if a fixed mindset can lead to kind of this stagnation, then what does leadership look like through the lens of a growth mindset?
Well, leaders with a growth mindset are all about embracing challenges
Okay.
and opportunities to learn and innovate.
Okay.
They foster a culture where feedback is valued.
Yeah.
Mistakes are seen as learning experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And team members feel empowered to, contribute their ideas.
That sounds like a much more dynamic and engaging kind of environment.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of leaders who really embody that approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So a great example is Darwin Smith, who led Kimberly-Clark for many years.
Okay.
And he was somebody who was constantly seeking out new information.
Mm-hmm.
and was very open about the fact that he was always learning
Yeah.
and pushing himself to,
To be qualified for the job.
yeah, to be worthy of the position that he held.
Wow. That's a stark contrast to what we were just talking about
Yeah,
with the CEO disease and all of that.
absolutely.
But it's not just about the business world, right?
But
Dweck talks about how this growth mindset can impact really all areas of life, even when we're facing like seemingly insurmountable obstacles. And one of the examples she gives is Christopher Reeve. In his recovery after his accident,
yes,
he was told he would never walk again.
right.
But he refused to accept those limitations.
Mm.
And he really embraced this, grueling physical therapy regimen.
Yeah, and he really pushed the boundaries of what medical science, thought was possible
Yeah,
at the time.
that's incredible.
It's really remarkable.
So the growth mindset, then, it's not just about, reaching some endpoint of success. It's really about the journey itself.
Yeah.
It's about the continuous learning, the pushing your boundaries.
Right. It's about the process of growth
Exactly.
and development.
Another example is the Olympic wrestler Patricia Miranda.
Oh, yeah, she's fantastic.
She started out as like a total novice, like actually mocked.
Yeah, a lot of people laughed at her when she first started
Yeah.
wrestling.
But instead of giving up, she used those setbacks
Mhm.
to see how far that effort and dedication could really take her
Right. And she ended up winning a bronze medal
at the Olympics.
at the Olympics.
Wow.
Yeah.
What I find really inspiring about her story is that it didn't stop there. She went on to Yale Law School.
Yeah, she's an amazing person.
So it's this idea of constantly challenging yourself, seeking out new horizons.
Yeah, and her journey really underscores the importance of effort
Right.
in achieving success.
It's not just about that raw talent.
Right. It's not just about being, naturally gifted. It's about the work that you put in.
Yeah, this reminds me of Michael Jordan, who, considered to be one of the most naturally gifted athletes. But what people don't realize is the amount of like relentless practice that he put in.
Yeah, he was notorious for his work ethic.
Yeah.
He was always the first one in the gym and the last one to leave.
And Dweck argues that talent needs to be nurtured,
Right.
just like any other skill.
Yeah, you can't just coast on your natural abilities.
Right.
You have to constantly be working at it.
Even Babe Ruth, who, is known for his indulgences,
Right.
but even he was really dedicated to fitness and training.
During the off season.
Yeah, so it shows that true success requires that commitment and that understanding that there's really no shortcuts.
Right.
Okay, so we're seeing this pattern here.
Yeah.
It's the effort, the
Right.
willingness to embrace those challenges
Yeah.
that are key to really unlocking your potential,
Absolutely.
regardless of your innate ability.
It's not about where you start. It's about where you finish, and how much effort you're willing to put in to get there.
But there's another piece of the puzzle that Dweck talks about,
Okay.
and that's how we approach praise.
Oh, that's a really important point.
Yeah.
Because, she argues that praising effort
Okay.
and the learning process is far more effective than praising intelligence or talent.
Okay, so you're saying if we praise someone for their ability, we're kind of sending this message that that ability is fixed.
Exactly. So, for example, if you tell a child,
Right.
you're so smart, they might start to believe that their intelligence is just this predetermined thing.
Okay.
And then when they encounter a challenge or difficulty,
Yeah.
they might start to doubt their abilities.
And give up.
Yeah, and they might think, oh, well, maybe I'm not actually that smart after all.
All right.
There's actually a really fascinating study that Dweck talks about on the book where researchers gave children different types of praise
Okay.
after they solved a puzzle.
Okay.
So some children were praised for their intelligence. They were told, you're so smart.
Okay.
Others were praised for their effort.
Okay.
You worked really hard on that.
Yeah.
And the results were really striking.
What happened?
The children who were praised for their effort were more eager to tackle harder puzzles.
Oh, wow.
And they showed greater resilience when they struggled.
Interesting.
Whereas the children who were praised for their intelligence became more hesitant to take risks.
Yeah.
And their performance actually declined.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really, it really illustrates how our words can have a powerful impact on, someone's mindset.
It makes me think about how I praise my own kids.
Yeah.
And how I can really make sure that I'm praising the effort and not just the outcome.
Right. And I think it's a really crucial insight
Yeah.
for parents, for educators,
Absolutely.
for anyone who works with children.
Yeah.
Because, we need to be mindful of the messages that we're sending
Absolutely.
through our praise.
This reminds me of another concept that Dweck talks about,
Sure.
and that's the idea of like a false growth mindset.
Ah, yes.
And I think this is something that a lot of people can probably relate to,
Yeah, I think we've all probably encountered this at some point.
where you're kind of talking the talk
Yeah.
of embracing challenges,
Right.
but you haven't really fully internalized those principles.
Yeah, you say all the right things,
Yep.
but then when you hit a real roadblock, you
Yeah.
kind of revert back to those fixed mindset patterns.
Right, like the avoidance, the
Yeah.
blame, the self-criticism.
Exactly.
So how do we know then if we're really genuinely embracing that growth mindset?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Or are we just kind of fooling ourselves?
Well, I think it starts with being honest with yourself
Okay.
and paying attention to your internal monologue.
Mm-hmm.
What are you telling yourself
Right.
when you face a challenge?
Okay.
Are you constantly judging yourself and others
Mm-hmm.
based on those fixed traits?
Okay.
Or are you focusing on effort learning and the potential for growth?
Mm.
And I think it's also about observing your behavior.
Okay.
Are you actively seeking out challenges,
Mm-hmm.
or are you sticking to what you know?
Okay.
Are you open to feedback,
Mm.
or do you get defensive when somebody criticizes your work?
Right. Are you putting those principles into action?
Exactly,
Okay.
because, tree mindset change,
Mm-hmm.
it involves a deep shift in our beliefs. It's not just, a quick fix.
Right.
It's a continuous process of self-awareness and choosing to respond to challenges
Okay.
in a growth-oriented way.
It sounds like a journey,
Yeah,
not just a destination.
it's a lifelong process.
Dweck talks about this idea of becoming right. Like a fixed mindset doesn't allow for the concept of growth.
Yeah, it's like you have to already be something
Right.
in order to be considered successful.
She gives the story of Loretta,
Oh, yeah.
who immigrated to the United States.
When she was 5 years old,
Yeah.
and within days of arriving, she was given a test
Mm-hmm.
and placed in a kindergarten class that wasn't considered to be the elite class.
So even though she was only 5,
Mhm.
she was already being labeled and categorized.
Right, and that experience really had a lasting impact on her.
Wow.
She carried with her this belief that her intelligence was somehow fixed
Mm-hmm.
and that she had been, deemed not good enough.
That's heartbreaking to think about how, that single experience
Mhm.
at such a young age could really shape her mindset so profoundly.
Yeah, and it really, underscores the importance of creating environments that nurture a growth mindset,
Especially for young children.
especially for young children,
Yeah.
where they're encouraged to explore and experiment
Right.
without fear of judgment or labeling.
Dweck also did a study with junior high students
Mm-hmm.
and tracked their academic performance.
Over 2 years.
Yeah.
And the results really demonstrated the impact of mindset.
Oh, wow.
So the students with a fixed mindset actually saw their grades decline
Mm-hmm.
over those 2 years.
Okay.
And they tended to blame their abilities or their teachers for their struggles.
So they weren't taking ownership.
No, they weren't taking responsibility for their own learning.
Whereas the students with a growth mindset,
Yeah.
they actually improved their grades.
Mhm.
And they were using challenges as opportunities to learn.
Right. They were seeing those challenges
Yeah.
as stepping stones rather than roadblocks.
Right. So their mindsets were actually shaping their reality.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And it wasn't just about their grades. Dweck observed that their mindsets influenced their study habits as well.
How so?
Well, students with a fixed mindset tended to study very passively.
Okay.
So they would just, reread their notes
Okay.
or try to memorize facts.
If you think your intelligence is fixed, then why bother
Right.
to really engage with the material?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But the students with a growth mindset,
Mm-hmm.
they would actively engage with the material.
Okay.
They would test their understanding.
Mm-hmm.
They would seek out different perspectives. They weren't afraid to ask questions
Yeah.
or admit when they didn't understand something.
They were really focused on the process,
Yeah,
not just the outcome.
exactly.
And Dweck believes that this is especially crucial for students who face, stereotypes or biases
Yeah.
that might undermine their confidence.
Right. So, students from minority groups
Yeah.
or women in STEM fields,
Right.
They're often told implicitly or explicitly that they don't belong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so when they encounter setbacks or negative stereotypes,
Right.
it can be very easy to internalize those messages
Yeah.
and doubt their abilities.
But fostering that growth mindset can be really empowering for those students.
Absolutely.
Right.
It helps them to see challenges as opportunities
Mm.
and develop that resilience to persevere in the face of adversity.
To recognize that their abilities are not predetermined
Right.
by their background or their gender or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Dweck did a study with female college students in a challenging math course.
Yeah, this is a great study.
What happened?
So the women who had a growth mindset,
Mm-hmm.
they maintained a strong sense of belonging,
Okay.
even when they felt stereotyped.
Mm.
You know, they drew support from their peers,
Okay.
and they challenged those who disrespected them.
They weren't going to let those limiting beliefs define them. And it really highlights the power of mindset in shaping our experiences,
Yeah,
even when we're in environments that might feel stacked against us.
absolutely.
I'm also curious to hear more about how this plays out in our personal lives.
Okay.
Like, how does that fixed versus growth mindset dynamic
Yeah.
show up in our relationships?
Well, in a fixed mindset,
Mm-hmm.
relationships can become a battleground
Okay.
for proving your worth.
Mm.
It's about being the smarter,
Okay.
more successful, or more attractive partner.
So it becomes a competition.
Yeah, it becomes a competition.
Right.
Dweck talks about a couple, Susan and Martin,
Okay.
where Martin was constantly threatened
Mm.
by Susan's charisma and success.
So even though he was successful in his own right, he felt like he was being overshadowed.
Yeah, and it seemed like his fixed mindset made him see the relationship as a zero-sum game.
Right. If she's winning, then he must be losing.
Exactly.
And this need to prove oneself can show up in other ways, too. Penelope in the book, she repeatedly sabotaged her relationships
Yeah.
by finding flaws in her partners.
Even over, like, really minor issues.
So she was looking for perfection.
Yeah.
And then finding any excuse to end the relationship before it could really get serious.
Right. She believed that she was just, unlucky in love.
Mm-hmm.
But her fixed mindset was actually preventing her
Okay.
from experiencing real intimacy and growth within a relationship.
That's really sad. But it does highlight how these deeply held beliefs can impact our ability to connect with others.
Absolutely.
And then there's the whole issue of blame.
Oh, yeah.
When conflicts arise in a fixed mindset, it's always the other person's fault.
Right. Their flaws are seen as unchangeable.
So there's no point in even trying
Right.
to understand or work through the issue.
Exactly.
She describes a couple, Brenda and Jack,
Mm-hmm.
who would constantly get into these arguments where they're just throwing accusations back and forth.
Right. They were each convinced that they were right
Mm-hmm.
and that the other person was the problem.
So they were stuck,
Yeah.
unable to see their own contribution to the conflict.
Exactly.
And this is where the growth mindset offers a more compassionate and forgiving approach to relationships.
Absolutely.
Because if you believe that your partner is capable of growth,
Mm-hmm.
you're more likely to see their mistakes as opportunities for learning and understanding,
Right.
rather than as personal attacks.
And it's about creating a safe space
Mm-hmm.
for vulnerability
Okay.
where both partners feel supported
Yeah.
in their individual journeys and in their shared growth as a couple.
Dweck shares an example of Laura and James,
Mm-hmm.
who really helped each other to achieve their dreams.
Yeah, they created this really beautiful environment of mutual support,
Okay.
celebrating each other's successes
Mm-hmm.
and providing comfort during challenges.
That's really inspiring.
Yeah, it's a great illustration of what's possible.
Yeah.
When you approach a relationship with a growth mindset,
It's not about finding that perfect partner.
Right.
It's about choosing to love and support each other
mm-hmm.
through the imperfections and the challenges of life.
Absolutely.
I'm curious about how this mindset plays out then when we face major setbacks or adversity in life.
Yeah, well, in a fixed mindset,
Yeah.
setbacks are seen as threats to your ego
Okay.
and your sense of worth.
Mm-hmm.
They reinforce that belief that you're not good enough.
Okay.
So you might try to ignore them,
Okay.
blame others, or just give up altogether.
But in a growth mindset, those setbacks are seen as opportunities.
Yeah, for learning and growth.
Right.
They're seen as valuable feedback
Mm.
that can help you improve and develop your skills.
Okay.
It's about shifting your perspective
Okay.
and seeing those challenges as stepping stones
Mhm.
rather than roadblocks.
She shares a story of a former graduate student
Mm-hmm.
who was really devastated.
Yeah, she had submitted her thesis research to a prestigious journal,
Okay.
and it received some really harsh criticism.
Oh, wow.
And she felt like a failure.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of giving up,
Yeah.
she reminded herself of her growth mindset
Okay.
and chose to see that feedback as a chance to make her work even stronger.
Wow.
So she addressed every single criticism,
Mm-hmm.
revised her paper, and eventually got it published
In the same
in
journal.
the same journal that had rejected it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a great example of how our mindset can really determine whether we crumble under pressure
Mm-hmm.
or rise to the occasion.
She talks about the importance of developing what she calls a growth mindset step.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So it's basically this conscious choice
Okay.
to reframe your thinking
Mm-hmm.
and approach challenges with a focus on learning and development.
Okay.
It's acknowledging that setbacks are a natural part of the process.
Yeah.
And that your ability to bounce back
Mm-hmm.
is what really defines success.
But it's about building that mental muscle
Exactly.
to be able to shift your perspective
Yeah,
and see the opportunity even in the midst of that difficulty.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's something that you can cultivate and strengthen over time.
Right. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
But it is possible to
Exactly.
shift from that fixed mindset to a growth mindset.
It's a journey.
Yeah.
But it's a journey worth taking
Absolutely.
because the rewards are immense.
So much to learn.
Yeah.
So much to unpack here.
Yeah.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
Absolutely. And this brings us to, I guess, a big question. Can mindsets actually be changed?
Yeah.
Like if someone have that fixed mindset, can they shift to a growth mindset?
It feels almost like rewiring your brain. Is that even possible?
Dweck's research is actually really encouraging on that front.
Oh, okay.
It suggests that our mindsets are not set in stone.
Okay.
They can be cultivated, but
Okay.
it's not about like just flipping a switch.
Right.
It's a journey. It
Oh.
takes time and effort.
Okay, so where do you even begin?
I think it starts with becoming aware of those fixed mindset triggers,
Okay.
the situations that make you feel threatened or defensive.
Okay.
When you start to notice those patterns,
Yeah.
you can consciously choose a different response.
So let's say, for example, someone gets critical feedback at work,
Mm-hmm.
and their fixed mindset wants to make them like dismiss it or
Yeah.
blame someone else.
Right.
How can they start to shift their thinking there?
Well, they could ask themselves, what can I learn from this feedback?
Okay.
How can I use this feedback to improve?
Instead of seeing it as a personal attack.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about turning it into an opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
Dweck has actually developed programs
Oh, wow.
designed to help people cultivate a growth mindset.
Okay.
One of them is called Brainology,
Okay.
and it's a program that teaches students about the brain's plasticity,
Okay.
the idea that our brains can actually change and grow throughout our lives.
So it's not just about like willpower or positive thinking. There's actual science to back this up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the results of the Brainology program have been really impressive.
Oh, wow. What happened?
Well, the students who participated in the program showed improved grades,
Okay.
greater motivation, and a greater willingness to embrace challenges.
Mm.
They understood that effort and dedication could actually change their brains.
So it's almost like they were given permission
Yeah.
to not be perfect,
Right.
to make mistakes, to learn.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
It really is.
Now let's look at how mindset plays out in a specific area.
Okay.
Negotiation.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Because that's such a crucial skill
Mm,
in so many aspects of life, from business deals to personal relationships.
absolutely.
But I think when a lot of people think of negotiation, they think of it as this competition
Hmm.
where, each side is trying to get the best deal for themselves.
Right.
Is that kind of a fixed mindset approach?
I think it can be.
Mm-hmm.
I think people with a fixed mindset often approach negotiation as a win-lose proposition.
Okay.
They're focused on getting the biggest slice of the pie, even if it means damaging the relationship.
So they might resort to those more aggressive tactics
Yeah.
or manipulation,
Right.
which could lead to resentment and mistrust.
Exactly.
But with a growth mindset,
Mm-hmm.
negotiation is seen as an opportunity to create value for both parties.
Right. It's about finding solutions
Right.
that meet everyone's needs.
Mm-hmm.
It's about building trust,
Okay.
strengthening the relationship.
So it's more collaborative.
Yeah, it's more of a partnership.
Okay.
There was actually a study done with business students
Okay.
where they were primed with either a fixed or growth mindset
Okay.
before a negotiation exercise.
Okay. Interesting.
And the results were fascinating.
What happened?
So the students with the growth mindset were more likely to find mutually beneficial solutions.
Oh, wow.
And they also reported feeling more satisfied with the outcome.
So not only did get a better deal,
Yeah,
they also felt better about it.
exactly.
Interesting.
And they were also more likely to build rapport
Okay.
and trust with the other party.
So it's a win-win.
Yeah, it really is.
This seems especially relevant in today's workplace.
Absolutely.
One area where I think a lot of people struggle is with feedback.
Yeah.
Because in a growth mindset culture,
Right.
feedback is seen as this gift,
Right.
as this valuable tool for learning and development.
Absolutely.
But a lot of managers, I think, really struggle with giving effective feedback.
Yeah, it's a tough skill.
They might avoid it altogether,
Right.
or they might be like overly critical and focus on those weaknesses
Yeah.
rather than the strengths.
Exactly. And I think that comes from a fixed mindset.
Uh,
That belief that abilities are fixed
Yeah.
and that criticism is a threat to someone's ego.
So instead of seeing it as an opportunity for growth, they see it as something negative.
Yeah, something to be feared and avoided.
So in a growth mindset culture, then feedback is essential to that learning process.
Right. It's about helping people to identify their strengths,
Okay.
recognize areas for improvement,
Mm-hmm.
and reach their full potential.
So what are some key principles for giving feedback then in a way that fosters that growth mindset?
Well, one important principle is to focus on specific behaviors and strategies,
Okay.
rather than making general judgments about a person's abilities.
So for example, instead of saying you're not good at presentations,
Right.
you might say, I noticed that you tend to rush through the slides. Maybe try slowing down,
Yeah, exactly.
pausing for emphasis.
Give them something concrete
Yeah.
to work with.
That's much more helpful than
Yeah.
just feeling like you're inherently bad at something.
Exactly.
And it's important to emphasize that potential for growth and improvement.
Right.
So instead of saying you need to work on your time management skills,
Mm.
you could say, I know you're capable of managing your time effectively. Let's explore some strategies that might help you.
Exactly. It's about framing it in a way
Yeah.
that's empowering,
Yeah.
not demoralizing.
And creating that safe environment where
100%.
feedback is welcomed and valued.
Right.
It's important to remember that a growth mindset applies to receiving feedback as well.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just about giving it.
Yeah.
So instead of getting defensive or making excuses when we receive criticism, we can try to see it as an opportunity to learn and improve.
Right.
It's about listening actively.
Yeah.
Asking clarifying questions and focusing on that potential for growth.
Absolutely.
I think that can be really challenging,
It can be.
but it is much more beneficial than clinging to that fixed mindset.
Absolutely.
Now, let's zoom out a bit
Okay.
and look at kind of those societal implications of these mindsets.
Yeah.
Dweck argues that our culture often really promotes those fixed mindset beliefs, emphasizing talent, intelligence, achievement
Right.
as these fixed traits.
Yeah, it's like we're obsessed with labeling people
Yeah.
as gifted or talented.
From a very young age.
Yeah.
And that can have some pretty negative consequences.
Absolutely.
It can lead to increased anxiety,
Right.
pressure to perform.
People become afraid of failure,
Yeah.
and they're less likely to take risks.
It's this constant competition and comparison
Yeah.
rather than collaboration and support.
And it can lead to this belief that our worth is determined by our achievements.
Rather than by just our inherent value as human beings.
Exactly.
So how do we start to shift then towards more of a growth mindset society?
Well, I think we need to start valuing effort learning and continuous improvement.
Okay.
We need to celebrate resilience, the ability to bounce back from setbacks.
Okay.
And we need to create environments where people feel safe to make mistakes,
Yeah.
to ask for help, and to learn from each other.
So it's about fostering that sense of community
Yeah.
and support rather than competition and judgment.
Absolutely.
Let's dive into another area where mindset plays a really big role.
Okay.
Sports.
Oh, yeah.
We often hear about athletes who are naturals or gifted.
Right.
But Dweck's research really suggests that mindset can be just as important as that raw talent.
Yeah, it's not just about your physical abilities. It's about your mental game as well.
So you could have two athletes
Right.
with equal natural ability,
Yeah,
but the one with the growth mindset is going to be more likely to achieve their full potential.
exactly.
Dweck highlights the story of Billy Beane,
Oh, yeah, he's a great example.
who was this talented baseball player,
Mhm.
but he struggled with a fixed mindset.
Yeah, he couldn't handle failure.
Mm.
Every setback just shattered his confidence.
It sounds like he had this belief that he was supposed to be a star.
Yeah.
And when he faced challenges, it was this blow to his ego.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was so focused on proving his talent
Mm-hmm.
that he couldn't really embrace the process of learning and growth.
It's so important to be able to learn from your mistakes.
Absolutely.
And he wasn't able to do that.
Right. He was trapped by his own fixed mindset.
He eventually realized that he lacked the mindset of a champion.
Mm-hmm.
And he observed another player, Lenny Dykstra,
Yep.
who wasn't as naturally gifted as Bean,
Right.
but he had this incredible drive and determination to improve.
Yeah, he was a real grinder.
Yeah.
He just kept working at it.
He was the embodiment of that growth mindset.
Exactly.
And that realization was really pivotal for Bean.
Mm-hmm.
He went on to become the general manager of the Oakland Athletics.
Yeah.
And he used his understanding of mindset
Yeah.
to build a really successful team.
Right. He started looking for players who had that growth mindset,
Okay.
the players who were coachable, resilient,
Oh, okay.
and always striving to improve.
And how did that work out for him?
It worked out incredibly well.
Yeah.
The Oakland A's, despite having a smaller budget than many other teams,
Yeah.
were consistently competitive. And they often outperformed teams with more star power.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's a great example
Yeah.
of how a growth mindset can really level the playing field.
It's not just about the money
Right.
or the resources that you have.
Exactly.
Dweck's research highlights a number of ways that athletes with a growth mindset approach their sport differently.
Yeah.
They're more likely to embrace those challenges.
Mm-hmm.
They persist in the face of setbacks. They focus on the learning process.
Right. They believe in their ability to develop and improve their skills.
They're not afraid to make mistakes.
Exactly.
Because they know that that's how they're going to grow.
It's all part of the process.
And they're more coachable because they're open to feedback. They're always looking for ways to improve.
Exactly.
This contrasts sharply with athletes who have that fixed mindset, who tend to avoid challenges,
Right.
give up easily, focus on proving their talent rather than developing it.
Right.
And they get defensive when they receive criticism.
It becomes more about protecting their ego than about reaching their full potential.
She gives lots of examples of great athletes
Yeah.
who exemplified that growth mindset, from Michael Jordan to Babe Ruth to Mia Hamm.
Right. They all shared this dedication to practice,
Yeah.
this drive to constantly improve, and this belief in their ability to grow.
Regardless of their innate talent.
Exactly.
And she also emphasizes the role that coaches play
Oh, yeah. Coaches are so important.
in fostering that growth mindset in their athletes.
Absolutely.
Coaches who focus on effort, learning, and teamwork can really create environments where those athletes can thrive
Right.
and reach their full potential.
And a great example of this is John Wooden.
The legendary UCLA basketball coach.
Yes.
His philosophy really transcended just winning and losing.
Yeah. It was about striving for excellence
Okay.
in all areas of life. He instilled in his players this belief in their ability to grow and achieve their goals.
And his approach wasn't about yelling
No.
or demanding perfection.
It was about teaching,
Okay.
inspiring,
Yeah.
and nurturing a love of learning.
And it clearly worked.
It did.
His teams won 10 NCAA championships.
In a span of 12 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's an amazing record.
But his legacy extends far beyond the court.
Absolutely.
He inspired people from all walks of life to embrace that growth mindset and strive for excellence
Yeah.
in all areas of their lives.
And his teachings are still relevant today.
Yeah,
They're timeless.
absolutely.
They apply to anyone who wants to achieve their full potential.
Okay, so now let's shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and explore how mindset plays out in the world of business and leadership.
Right.
In today's world, it's constantly evolving.
Yeah, it's a fast-paced environment.
How does a growth mindset help leaders to navigate that landscape effectively?
It's crucial.
Okay.
Leaders with a growth mindset embrace challenges. They foster a culture of learning.
Okay.
They see setbacks as opportunities for growth and innovation.
So they're not afraid to take risks.
Exactly. They understand that failure is part of the process and that you can learn from your mistakes.
I don't have to have all the answers.
Right. They're willing to admit when they don't know something,
Mm-hmm.
and they're always looking for new information and perspectives.
They empower their teams
Absolutely.
and foster collaboration.
Right. They understand that success is not about individual brilliance.
Mm-hmm.
It's about collective effort and growth.
And this really contrasts with those leaders who have that fixed mindset,
Yeah.
who tend to avoid those risks,
Right.
resist
They
feedback.
create a culture of fear and blame.
Yeah, where people are afraid to speak up,
Yeah.
share their ideas.
And they might cling to the status quo,
Mm.
even when it's clear that change is needed.
Dweck gives some examples of leaders who really embody the power of that growth mindset.
Yeah.
And one of those is Lou Gerstner,
Oh, yeah. He's a great example.
who took over as CEO of IBM.
Back in the early 1990s,
Yeah.
when the company was really on the verge of collapse,
It was a very different time for IBM back then.
it was,
Yeah.
they were losing market share.
Yeah.
Their stock price was plummeting.
Okay.
And Gerstner recognized that IBM's culture had become toxic.
Okay.
It was characterized by arrogance, complacency, and a resistance to change.
Wow. So how did he approach turning that around?
Well, he knew that he needed to completely transform the company culture
Okay.
if he was going to save IBM.
Yeah.
So he did a number of things.
Okay.
He flattened the organizational structure,
Okay.
giving more autonomy to teams and individuals.
Okay.
He broke down silos,
Mm-hmm.
encouraged collaboration and communication across departments,
Okay.
and he shifted the company's focus
Mm-hmm.
from internal processes to the needs of customers.
That's huge.
It was a radical shift
Yeah.
from IBM's previous leadership style.
And I'm guessing it met with some resistance.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of people were very resistant to change.
But ultimately, it was the right move.
it was.
Yeah.
Under Gerstner's leadership, IBM underwent this remarkable transformation.
Okay.
They became more innovative, more customer-focused,
Yeah.
and more adaptable to change.
And the results speak for themselves.
They do.
Yeah.
IBM went from being on the brink of collapse
Yeah.
to becoming one of the most successful technology companies in the world.
It's a really powerful example of how a growth mindset
Mm-hmm.
can really turn around a company that's facing that kind of existential crisis.
Absolutely.
And it's not just IBM. She gives other examples as well
Yes.
of leaders who've achieved success by embracing that growth mindset.
Another great example is Darwin Smith,
You're right.
who we talked about earlier.
At Kimberly-Clark,
Yes.
he transformed that company
Mhm.
from a struggling paper company to a global consumer products powerhouse.
Right.
And he did that by creating a culture of innovation and continuous improvement.
Exactly.
He was always pushing himself to learn and grow.
Yeah, he never rested on his laurels.
And he fostered that same spirit within his organization.
Mm-hmm.
And Dweck's research shows that this is not a coincidence.
Right.
That companies with growth mindset cultures tend to be more innovative, more adaptable to change.
More profitable
Right,
and
yeah.
more likely to attract and retain top talent.
So it's really a key driver of success in today's business world.
Absolutely.
Let's dive into a specific area of the workplace
Okay.
where mindset, I think, plays a really critical role, negotiation.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Whether you're closing a business deal or resolving a conflict with a colleague,
Right.
or even just deciding where to go to dinner with your family.
It's a skill that we use all the time
Yeah.
in different areas of our lives.
And Dweck's research suggests that our mindsets can have a big impact on how effectively we negotiate.
Absolutely.
I imagine that people with a fixed mindset
Yeah.
might approach negotiation as this zero-sum game.
Right. Where they're trying to win at all costs.
Yeah.
They might view it as a battle of egos
Mhm.
where any concession is a sign of weakness.
Okay.
They might resort to aggressive tactics, manipulation, or even intimidation
Wow.
to get what they want.
Which can really damage relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and lead to that resentment.
Right.
But with a growth mindset,
Mm-hmm.
negotiation is seen as an opportunity to create value for both parties.
Yeah. It's not about one person winning
Okay.
and the other person losing.
Mm-hmm.
It's about finding a solution
Okay.
that benefits everyone involved.
So how do we approach negotiation with a growth mindset?
Well, I think one key principle is to go into the negotiation with a collaborative mindset.
Okay.
Don't see it as an adversarial battle. Approach it as a problem-solving exercise where you're working together
Yeah.
to find a solution that works for everyone.
It's that we mentality.
Exactly.
Not me versus you.
Right.
Oh.
Another important principle is to be a good listener.
Okay.
Really try to understand the other party's perspective,
Mm-hmm.
ask questions, clarify their needs,
Okay.
and try to see things from their point of view.
I think so often the key to finding a creative solution
Hmm.
is to really understand where the other person's coming from,
Absolutely.
and then be willing to compromise.
Yeah, you're not always going to get everything you want,
Right.
but you're more likely to reach an agreement that you're
Yeah.
both happy with if you're willing to make concessions
Okay.
and find that middle ground.
To finding that win-win.
Exactly.
And finally, focus on building that long-term relationship
Right.
rather than just trying to win the current negotiation.
Don't burn bridges.
Yeah.
You want to maintain those relationships.
Because ultimately, a good relationship is more valuable
Hmm.
than any single negotiation.
Absolutely.
Now, let's shift our focus to another important aspect of the workplace,
Okay.
feedback and coaching.
All right.
We talked about this a little bit earlier, but in a growth mindset culture, feedback is seen as that valuable tool.
Learning and development.
It's about helping people to identify their strengths, recognize areas for improvement,
Hmm.
and ultimately reach their full potential.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
It's not a one-time thing.
Um, but as Dweck's research shows,
Hmm.
giving effective feedback can be really difficult.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think sometimes it's because managers are afraid of conflict.
Okay.
They worry about hurting someone's feelings,
Hmm.
so they avoid giving feedback altogether.
Okay.
Or they sugarcoat it so
Yeah.
much
Right.
that it loses its impact.
Or they give feedback that's vague and general, like,
Yeah.
you need to be more proactive.
Right.
But they don't give any specific examples
They
what
just-
that looks like.
Or they might focus on criticizing weaknesses
Yeah.
rather than highlighting strengths
Yeah.
and areas for growth.
And all of these ineffective feedback practices can stem from that fixed mindset,
Right.
because those managers might believe that abilities are fixed
Yeah,
and that criticism is a threat to someone's ego.
exactly.
So they see feedback as a judgment
Mm.
rather than an opportunity for growth.
And that's really unfortunate
Yeah.
because feedback can be such a powerful tool for development.
So how can we give feedback then in
Sure.
a way that really fosters that growth mindset?
Well, Dweck highlights several key principles.
Okay.
First, focus on specific behaviors and strategies
Okay.
rather than making general judgments about a person's abilities.
Okay, so again, instead of saying you're not a good communicator,
Right?
you could say something like,
I noticed that in that meeting, you tended to interrupt your colleagues. Maybe you could try waiting for a pause in the conversation before jumping in.
so you're giving them something concrete to work with.
Exactly.
Mm.
And it's important to emphasize the potential for growth and improvement.
What?
So instead of saying, you really mess up that presentation,
Yeah.
you could say, I know you're capable of giving great presentations. Let's talk about what we can do differently next time.
So it's about framing the feedback in a way that's empowering,
Right.
not demoralizing,
Exactly.
and then creating that safe and supportive environment
Absolutely.
where feedback is welcomed and valued.
Yeah, you want to create a culture
Mm.
where people feel comfortable
Yeah.
giving and receiving feedback.
Now let's shift our focus to those broader societal implications of mindset.
Okay.
Um, Dweck argues that our culture often defaults to those fixed mindset beliefs, emphasizing talent, intelligence, achievement as these fixed traits.
Right. It's like we're constantly trying to label people
Yeah.
from a young age.
Like putting them into boxes.
Exactly.
And that can create a whole host of problems.
Absolutely.
It can lead to increased anxiety pressure to perform,
Right.
making people afraid to take risks and try new things.
Because they're so worried about failing
Yeah.
and, being seen as not good enough.
It can also fuel that unhealthy competition and comparison,
Yeah.
leading to a culture of judgment and scarcity.
Right. Rather than one of collaboration and abundance.
Yeah.
And it can distort our sense of self-worth,
Hmm?
making us believe that our value is tied to our achievements.
Right, rather than our intrinsic worth as human beings.
Exactly.
So how do we start to shift towards a more growth-minded society?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing the pervasiveness of fixed mindset beliefs
Okay.
and actively challenging them.
Mm-hmm.
We need to move away from labeling people
Okay.
and towards valuing effort, learning, and continuous improvement.
Okay.
We need to celebrate resilience,
Yeah.
the ability to bounce back from setbacks,
Okay.
and we need to create environments where it's safe to make mistakes, to ask for help,
Yeah.
and to learn from each other without fear of judgment.
So a society where everyone feels valued and has the opportunity to reach their full potential,
Exactly.
regardless of their perceived natural ability.
Right. It's about recognizing that everyone has something unique to offer
Mm-hmm.
and that our differences are strengths, not weaknesses.
That's a really beautiful vision.
It is.
And embracing that growth mindset, I think, is really the foundation
Mm-hmm.
for making that vision a reality.
Absolutely.
Let's dive into another fascinating area
Okay.
where mindset can have a really profound impact, the world of sports.
Yep. Yeah.
We often hear about these athletes who are naturals or gifted,
Right.
but Dweck's research suggests that mindset can be just as important as that raw talent.
Yeah. Sometimes even more so.
So you could have two athletes with equal natural ability,
Right.
but the one with the growth mindset is going to be more likely to achieve their full potential. And one of the most compelling examples she shares is the story of Billy Beane,
Oh, yeah.
who was this talented baseball player, but he struggled with a fixed mindset.
Yeah. He had all the talent in the world,
Okay.
but he just couldn't handle failure.
Mm.
Every setback was devastating to his confidence.
It's almost like he felt entitled to success.
Yeah, it was like he believed he was supposed to be a superstar.
Yeah.
And when he faced challenges, it felt like a personal attack.
Yeah.
He was so focused on proving his talent
Mm-hmm.
that he couldn't embrace the process of learning and growth.
So important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to be able to grow from those mistakes, and he couldn't do that.
Right. He was trapped by his own fixed mindset.
He eventually realized that he lacked the mindset of a true winner.
Mm-hmm.
And he observed another player, Lenny Dykstra,
Yeah.
who wasn't as naturally gifted as Bean,
Right.
but he had this incredible grit and determination.
Yeah.
He just wouldn't give up.
He was a real grinder. He
Yeah.
just kept working at it. And that really impressed Bean.
He saw the power of that mindset firsthand.
He did. And it really changed his perspective on what it takes to succeed.
And that led him to become the general manager of the Oakland Athletics.
Right. And he used his understanding of mindset to build a remarkably successful team.
Yeah, instead of just focusing on those players with raw talent,
Mm-hmm.
he looked for the ones who had that growth mindset.
Exactly. The ones who were coachable, resilient, always striving to improve.
And the results were pretty amazing.
They were, the Oakland A's, despite having a smaller budget than many other teams,
Right.
were consistently competitive.
Yeah, they were defying the odds.
They were. And they often outperformed teams with more star power.
So it really shows that a growth mindset can be a real game changer,
Absolutely.
even in a field that's often, obsessed with natural talent.
Yeah, it's not just about how much talent you have.
Right.
It's about how you develop that talent.
Dweck's research highlights several key ways that athletes with a growth mindset approach their sport differently.
Yeah.
They're more likely to embrace challenges, seeing them as opportunities for growth and development.
Right. They understand that setbacks are inevitable.
Right.
And they use those setbacks as fuel to get better.
They don't get discouraged by mistakes or criticism.
No, they see those experiences as learning opportunities.
And they're more coachable because they're open to feedback.
Mm-hmm.
They're always looking for ways to refine their technique.
Exactly. It's about the process of continuous learning and improvement.
Right, not just about the outcome.
And this contrasts sharply with athletes who have a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
They tend to avoid challenges. They give up easily when they encounter setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
They focus on proving their talent rather than developing it.
Okay.
And they get defensive when they receive criticism.
So it becomes more about protecting their ego
Right.
than about reaching their full potential.
Exactly. And Dweck gives a lot of examples of great athletes who embody this growth mindset.
Oh, like who?
Well, you've got Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
You've got Babe Ruth,
Mm-hmm.
me, him.
Right?
They all share this incredible dedication to practice,
Mm-hmm.
this drive to constantly improve,
Yeah.
and this belief in their ability to grow, regardless of their innate talent.
So they understood that talent was just the starting point.
Right.
It was their mindset and their dedication that really made them great.
Absolutely. And Dweck also emphasizes the role that coaches and mentors play
Yeah.
in fostering a growth mindset in athletes.
What do those coaches do differently?
Well, they emphasize effort learning and teamwork.
Okay.
They create environments where athletes feel supported and empowered
Mhm.
to reach their full potential.
So they're not just yelling or demanding perfection. They're
Yeah.
really teaching and inspiring and nurturing that love of learning.
Exactly. And a great example of this is John Wooden,
Yeah, the legendary UCLA basketball coach.
whose teams won 10 NCAA championships in 12 years.
It's incredible.
It's an amazing record.
But his legacy goes far beyond the basketball court.
It does.
Yeah.
He inspired people from all walks of life
Mm-hmm.
to embrace a growth mindset and strive for excellence in all areas of life.
It sounds like he really understood the power of mindset.
He did, and his philosophy is applicable to anyone who wants to achieve their full potential.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into Carol Dweck's mindset, the new psychology of success.
It's been a great conversation.
It really has, and we've covered a lot of ground. We talked about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
Right.
We looked at how our mindsets can impact our success in all areas of life.
From our careers to our relationships to our personal growth,
We explored some of the key principles for developing a growth mindset.
like embracing challenges, seeking out feedback, and focusing on effort and learning,
And we discussed how we can create a more growth-minded society.
where everyone feels valued and has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
So we encourage you to continue exploring this topic,
Yeah.
to reflect on your own mindset,
Mm.
and to see how you can apply these principles to your own life.
Because, as Dweck's research shows,
Yeah.
the power to change your mindset lies within you.
That's it for our deep dive today. Thanks for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.